Late November 1855, Washington, D.C., the White House. A carriage sits on the street in front of the most powerful building in America. Dr. Elwood Harvey waits in the passenger compartment. His hands are steady, but his mind races through everything that could go wrong in the next 10 seconds. A figure approaches, young, slim, dressed in a driver's uniform with a fitted jacket, bow tie, and cap pulled low. The figure climbs onto the driver's seat, takes the reins, and prepares to drive north. This is not a young man. This is Ann Maria Weems, 15 years old, formerly enslaved, and there is a $500 bounty on her head. The reward notice has been circulating for weeks. It describes her precisely. Bright mulatto, small freckles on her face, slender build, thick hair inclined to be sandy. Every slave catcher between here and Pennsylvania has memorized that description. Every sheriff, every innkeeper looking to collect easy money. And she is about to drive a carriage through the heart of slave territory. The roads ahead pass through Maryland, toll gates where operators will study her face, ferries where captains will decide whether to grant passage. And somewhere along those roads, men who would drag her back to Charles Price for that $500 reward. If anyone recognizes her, she dies. Not quickly. The punishment for an escape this elaborate would be made into a public example. Her family in Washington would never see her again. But staying means a lifetime under the control of a man who made her sleep beside his bed for 2 years just to ensure she could not run. Ann Maria snaps the reins. The carriage begins to move. She has one chance, one disguise, and 500 miles of enemy territory between her and freedom. To understand what Ann Maria Weems is about to do, you need to understand what Charles Price believed about the girl he held in bondage. Price was a slave trader from Montgomery County, Maryland. He bought and sold human beings for profit. When Ann Maria came into his possession as a child, she was just another piece of property to him, another asset, another body to control. But abolitionists had other plans. They established the Weems Family Ransom Fund, financed by Quakers in England and America, with one purpose: buy the freedom of every member of the Weems family. One by one, they succeeded. Ann Maria's mother, Arabella, was purchased and freed. Her brothers followed. Her sister, Catherine, walked free. Then came Ann Maria's turn. The abolitionists offered Price $700, a generous sum, more than fair market value for a child. Price refused. They came back with higher offers. Price refused again. For 6 years, he rejected every single offer. He would rather keep her than see her free. William Still, the great conductor of the Underground Railroad, later described Price as a man given to intemperance and gross profanity. His wife Caroline was cross and peevish. These were not people who saw Ann Maria as human. They saw her as property they refused to surrender. And then Price noticed something. Ann Maria was watching, learning, waiting. She was planning something. His solution was simple and cruel. He made her sleep in his bedroom, right beside the bed he shared with his wife, every single night for 2 years. If she could not leave that room without waking him, she could never escape. Price believed this arrangement made escape impossible. He was certain of it. A young girl under constant surveillance in the heart of slave territory. Washington surrounded by Maryland and Virginia. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 requiring every citizen in America to assist in capturing runaways. $500 rewards turning every neighbor into a potential bounty hunter. The system was designed to make freedom unreachable. Consider what Ann Maria faced. She was 15 years old. She had no money, no weapons, no friends in free territory. Every road heading north passed through communities that profited from catching people exactly like her. The newspapers would publish her description. The sheriffs would circulate her likeness. Innkeepers, ferry operators, toll collectors, farmers, merchants. Any one of them might recognize her face and claim that $500 reward. No young girl had ever escaped Washington through this kind of organized deception. The city was a fortress designed to keep black people in bondage. It sat between two of the largest slaveholding states in the Upper South. The routes north were watched. The borders were monitored. Even free black citizens needed to carry papers proving their status or risk being kidnapped into bondage. Price understood all of this. He had been in the business of buying and selling human beings for years. He knew the system. He knew its power. He knew that a 15-year-old girl sleeping in his bedroom had no chance of ever reaching freedom. What he did not know was that Jacob Bigelow, a Washington lawyer and Underground Railroad conductor, had been communicating with William Still in Philadelphia. They had been planning, waiting, preparing for the moment when Ann Maria could slip away. And on September 23, 1855, that moment arrived. Charles Price woke up to discover that the girl he had watched for 2 years was gone, vanished, and he had no idea where she went or how she did it. The first 15 miles were the most dangerous. Ann Maria slipped away from the Price household in Rockville on September 23, 1855. She moved through the Maryland countryside alone. No escort, no protection. Just a 15-year-old girl walking toward Washington with a target on her back. Every passing wagon could have been a slave catcher. Every man on horseback could have recognized her face from the reward notices that would soon flood the newspapers. She had to reach Jacob Bigelow's house in Washington before anyone realized she was missing. She made it. But freedom was still 500 miles away. The reward notice appeared within days. $500 for her capture. The description was precise. Bright mulatto, small freckles, slender build, thick sandy hair. Charles Price wanted her back, and he was willing to pay a fortune to anyone who could deliver her. For 6 weeks, Ann Maria could not leave Bigelow's house. The reward was too high, the risk too great. She stayed hidden while abolitionists planned the next stage of her escape. During those 6 weeks, they transformed her. She learned to walk like a young man, carry herself like a carriage driver, speak with the confidence of someone who had every right to be on the road. They dressed her in a driver's uniform, jacket, pants, bow tie, cap pulled low over her forehead. When she looked in the mirror, Joe Wright stared back. In late November, Dr. Elwood Harvey arrived from Philadelphia. He would pose as a gentleman traveling north. Ann Maria would pose as his driver. They would hide in plain sight. The carriage pulled away from the White House and headed into Maryland. The first test came almost immediately. A toll gate operator stopped them. He studied the carriage, studied the young driver, asked questions about where they were headed and why. Ann Maria kept her voice steady, her posture masculine, her eyes forward. The operator waved them through. Then came the ferry crossing. Another operator. More questions, more scrutiny, more seconds where everything could collapse. Ann Maria answered. The ferry carried them across. They kept moving. But the most dangerous nights were still ahead. Dr. Harvey had friends in Maryland, slaveholders, people who owned human beings just like Charles Price did. And to avoid suspicion, Harvey decided they would stay at these homes along the way. Ann Maria walked into the houses of people who would have gladly collected that $500 reward. She sat at their tables. She slept under their roofs, all while pretending to be Joe Wright, the loyal driver. Harvey played his role perfectly. He joked with his hosts that Joe might be a runaway. They laughed. Of course, a young male driver traveling with a respectable white physician could not possibly be a fugitive girl from Montgomery County. The idea was absurd. Harvey then claimed he suffered from dizzy spells and needed Joe to sleep in his room in case he fell ill during the night. His hosts agreed. And so Ann Maria spent the night in the same room as her only protector, surrounded by people who would destroy her if they knew the truth. On the second day, they crossed the Susquehanna River. On the other side, several men approached the carriage. They wanted to stop them, wanted to ask questions, wanted to look closer at the young driver. Dr. Harvey handled the disturbance. His calm authority, his respectable appearance, his quick explanations. The men backed away. Ann Maria drove on. 500 miles, every mile a chance to die, and she refused to stop. Picture this moment. Ann Maria sits at a dinner table in a Maryland farmhouse, Candlelight flickers across the faces of her hosts. They are slaveholders, people who profit from the same system that held her in bondage for 15 years, people who would collect $500 in reward money if they knew who was sitting 3 feet away from them. She cannot fidget, cannot look down, cannot let her voice rise to its natural pitch, cannot touch her face or adjust her cap in any way that might seem feminine. Every gesture must belong to Joe Wright. Every word must come from a young man who has driven carriages his entire life. Dr. Harvey makes conversation with his old friends. They discuss politics, business, the weather, and then someone makes a joke about runaways, about the trouble abolitionists cause, about the reward notices circulating through the county for some girl who escaped from Charles Price. Ann Maria feels her heart pound against her ribs. She keeps her face still, keeps her breathing steady, reaches for a glass of water with a hand that does not tremble. Any other 15-year-old would have broken, would have looked away at the wrong moment, would have flinched at the mention of reward money, would have made some small mistake that revealed the truth. Ann Maria makes no mistakes. She has been preparing for this moment her entire life, watching, learning, understanding exactly how to survive in a world designed to destroy her. Charles Price thought he knew her, thought 2 years of sleeping beside his bed meant he understood what she was capable of. He understood nothing. The dinner ends. The hosts show their guests to their rooms. Dr. Harvey explains that his dizzy spells require Joe to sleep nearby in case of emergency. The slaveholders think nothing of it. A gentleman with a medical condition and his loyal driver. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Ann Maria lies awake in the darkness of a slaveholder's home. She can hear voices in other rooms, footsteps in the hallway, the sounds of a household settling into sleep. Every noise could be someone coming to check on the driver. Every creak could be discovery. She does not sleep. She waits. She breathes. She remains perfectly still until morning comes and the carriage can move again. This is what courage looks like when you are 15 years old and hunted. It does not look like battlefield heroics. It does not look like dramatic confrontations. It looks like absolute stillness, perfect control. A girl becoming someone else so completely that even people trained to spot runaways see nothing but a carriage driver. For days, Ann Maria Weems held this disguise. Through toll gates and ferry crossings, through conversations with strangers who studied her face, through nights in the homes of people who would have destroyed her for money, through a confrontation at the Susquehanna River where men tried to stop their carriage and ask questions. She never wavered, never slipped, never gave anyone a single reason to look closer. Charles Price made her sleep beside his bed because he believed constant surveillance would break her, would make her give up hope, would teach her that escape was impossible. Instead, those 2 years taught her something else entirely. They taught her patience. They taught her how to hide in plain sight. They taught her how to wait for the perfect moment and then execute a plan without a single error. Price created the very skills that allowed her to defeat him. November 22, 1855. Thanksgiving Day, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The carriage stopped in front of a row house on Ronaldson Street. Dr. Elwood Harvey stepped down and knocked on the door. Inside lived William Still, the man they called the father of the Underground Railroad, the man who had helped coordinate this entire operation from hundreds of miles away. The door opened. Still looked at the carriage, looked at the young driver still holding the reins. And then Ann Maria Weems climbed down and walked into freedom. She had done it. 500 miles through slave territory, toll gates and ferry crossings, nights in the homes of slaveholders, a confrontation at the Susquehanna River, 6 weeks hiding in Washington while $500 reward notices circulated with her exact description. And not once had anyone seen through her disguise. William Still stood amazed. His household gathered around the young woman who had just arrived, dressed as a carriage driver. They studied her uniform, her posture, the way she carried herself. Still later wrote that the household was stunned by how convincing her transformation had been. in his official report for the Underground Railroad, Still recorded his impressions. She is about 15 years of age, bright mulatto, well-grown, smart, and good-looking. He had helped hundreds of freedom seekers reach safety through his network. But this one was different. This was a girl who had outsmarted everyone. They took a photograph. Ann Maria posed in her driver's uniform, the cap, the bow tie, the jacket. Joe Wright captured on film. Still sent the photograph to her mother in Washington. Proof that her daughter was alive. Proof that she was free. Proof that Charles Price had lost. But Philadelphia was not the end. The Fugitive Slave Act meant that slave catchers could legally operate anywhere in America. Ann Maria was not truly safe until she crossed into Canada. She stayed with the Still family for several days. Then Reverend Charles Bennett Ray escorted her to New York. She arrived at the home of Lewis Tappan and his wife Sarah on November 28th. Sarah Tappan used $63 from the Weems family ransom fund to buy Ann Maria proper winter clothing for the Canadian climate. The same fund that Charles Price had rejected for 6 years now paid for his former property to dress warmly for her new life in freedom. From New York, Reverend Amos Freeman escorted Ann Maria by train. They traveled through Rochester, through Niagara Falls, across the great suspension bridge that carried so many freedom seekers from bondage to liberty. In December 1855, Ann Maria Weems arrived at the Dawn settlement in Dresden, Ontario. Her aunt and uncle were waiting. William Henry and Anne Bradley had escaped bondage themselves years earlier. They had chosen new names to mark their new lives. Now they welcomed their niece to the same freedom. Ann Maria enrolled at the Buxton Mission School at the Elgin settlement. She would receive the education that American slavery had denied her. She would build a life that Charles Price had tried to make impossible. Back in Maryland, Price had nothing. The girl he refused to sell for $700 was gone. The girl he made sleep beside his bed for 2 years had vanished. His surveillance meant nothing. His reward money caught no one. His absolute certainty that escape was impossible had been proven absolutely wrong. A 15-year-old girl had beaten him, and there was nothing he could do about it. William Still kept records. Every freedom seeker who passed through his station in Philadelphia had their story documented. Names, dates, routes, the details that history would need to remember what these men and women had accomplished. When he published the Underground Railroad records in 1872, Ann Maria Weems was among the stories he told. Her escape became part of the permanent historical record. The girl who became Joe Wright, the 15-year-old who fooled slaveholders in their own homes, the child who drove a carriage past the White House and through 500 miles of enemy territory. Still's account captured what made her escape extraordinary. The 6 years Charles Price refused to sell her. The 2 years she slept beside his bed. The 6 weeks hiding in Washington while reward notices circulated. The nights in slaveholder homes. The toll gates and ferry crossings. The confrontation at the Susquehanna River. Every detail preserved for generations to come. The photograph survived as well. Ann Maria in her driver's uniform. The visual proof of her transformation. Joe Wright staring back at the camera with the steady gaze of someone who had just accomplished the impossible. That image became one of the most recognizable pictures from the entire Underground Railroad movement. But the recognition extended far beyond documentation. By August 1858, every remaining member of the Weems family had been purchased and freed through the Weems Family Ransom Fund. Her brothers James and Addison walked free. Her mother Arabella wrote to William Still expressing her joy and gratitude. "I am expecting daily the return of Augustus," she said of her last child still in bondage. "May heaven grant him a safe deliverance and smile propitiously upon you and all kind friends who have aided in his return to me." The same fund that Charles Price rejected for 6 years ultimately freed everyone he had tried to keep in bondage. His greed accomplished nothing. His cruelty achieved nothing. The abolitionists won completely. Historians later recognized the significance of what Ann Maria had done. Stanley Harold, a professor who studied the Underground Railroad extensively, wrote that the importance of gender is significant to the case of Weems, as her disguise is what allowed her escape to be successful. Her transformation from young woman to male carriage driver was not just clever, it was revolutionary. It exploited the assumptions that slaveholders made about gender and capability. They never imagined a 15-year-old girl could maintain such a deception under such pressure. 3 books have been written about Ann Maria and her family. A Shadow on the Household by Brian Prince, Stealing Freedom by Eliza Lynn Carbone, The Underground Railroad, Ann Maria Weems. Her story became a subject of study and admiration. Scholars analyzed her escape as an example of courage, planning, and the power of interracial cooperation between black and white abolitionists. The broader lesson was unmistakable. The system of slavery depended on the belief that black people could not outthink their captors, could not plan complex operations, could not maintain discipline under pressure, could not achieve what whites assumed was beyond their capability. Ann Maria Weems destroyed those assumptions. She proved that a 15-year-old girl with no resources and no weapons could defeat an entire system designed to keep her in chains. She proved that intelligence and courage mattered more than surveillance and reward money. Charles Price learned this lesson too late. He had underestimated her for 6 years, and by the time he understood what she was capable of, she was already free. Ann Maria Weems did not stop at survival. She built a life. At the Buxton Mission School in Ontario, she received the education that American bondage had denied her. She learned to read and write with the fluency that slaveholders had deliberately withheld from black children. She studied subjects that Charles Price never imagined she would access. Every lesson was proof that the system which held her for 15 years had failed to limit her potential. The Dawn settlement where she lived was more than a refuge. It was a community of formerly enslaved people who had built something permanent. They had homes, churches, schools, farms. They had created a society based on freedom and mutual support in a country that would not drag them back into bondage. Ann Maria became part of this community, part of a generation that proved what black people could accomplish when the chains came off. In 1861, her parents John and Arabella moved to the Dawn settlement with their youngest children. The family that had been scattered across multiple states and owners was finally together. John had spent years fighting to free his wife and children. Arabella had endured separation from her babies, watching them sold away one by one. Now they sat at the same table, slept under the same roof, celebrated holidays as a complete family. The Weems family stayed in Canada for 9 years. Then they made a remarkable decision. They returned to Washington, D.C. By 1870, John, Arabella, their son John and daughter Mary were living in the same city where Ann Maria had once hidden for 6 weeks with a $500 bounty on her head. The same city where she climbed onto that carriage in front of the White House. The same city surrounded by the slave states that had once made escape seem impossible. But everything had changed. The Civil War had ended. The 13th Amendment had abolished slavery throughout the United States. The system that Charles Price profited from no longer existed. The Weems family could walk the streets of Washington as free citizens of a transformed nation. Ann Maria's legacy extended far beyond her own family. Her story became a symbol of what the Underground Railroad accomplished, not just moving bodies from south to north, but proving that the ideology of white supremacy was built on lies. Slaveholders claimed that black people lacked the intelligence for complex planning. Ann Maria planned an escape that fooled everyone for 500 miles. They claimed black people could not maintain discipline under pressure. Ann Maria held her disguise for days while sleeping in the homes of her enemies. They claimed constant surveillance made escape impossible. Ann Maria escaped from a man who watched her every night for 2 years. She dismantled every assumption they held, not with arguments, with actions. Today, her photograph still exists. Joe Wright staring at the camera, a 15-year-old girl who transformed herself so completely that slaveholders served her dinner in their own homes. That image represents something timeless: the refusal to accept the limits others impose, the courage to become someone new when survival demands it, the understanding that those who underestimate you have given you your greatest weapon. Charles Price believed he knew exactly what Ann Maria Weems was capable of. He watched her for 2 years and saw nothing but property, nothing but a girl who would never escape. He was looking right at her, and he never saw her at all.